Guide me among those whom thou hast guided aright, and preserve me among those whom thou hast preserved, and befriend me among those whom thou hast befriended. Bless me in whatsoever thou dost grant me, and deliver me from the evil of what thou hast judged. Surely thou judgest, and none can judge against thee, and he whom thou befriendest is not disgraced. Blessed art thou, O Lord, and exalted be thee above what they set up besides thee. I bear witness, nothing deserves to be served besides thee, and I bear witness that Muhammad is thy servant and apostle. Amen.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Sister Sajdah Muhammad. Join us for Donate and Sip 2. We are hosting an event to help raise funds for the completion of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad House Museum. The event will take place Saturday, July 9th, 2022. This non-alcoholic wine and sparkling tea tasting event is sponsored by Magnolia Crescent Non-Alcoholic Winery and will be held at the historic Honorable Elijah Muhammad House located at 4847 South Woodlawn Avenue in the rear garden. Bring a friend, come by, and celebrate this historic project with us on Saturday, July 9th, 2022 from 4 to 7 p.m. Central Time. To register for this historic event, click the link in the bio or simply go to eventbrite.com and search Donate and Sip. Capacity is limited.
You belong to yourself. You're an independent people, created from the nation of free people. Yes, sir. You don't need to go nowhere but to yourself. Yes, sir. There will be a great separation. Yes, sir. So I said, it is on now.
The college is meant to prepare you for your future. That the time dictates that if we don't do something for ourselves as a people, we will be destroyed. And the aim of the enemy right now is to take us out.
We have God with us. We have Him as our guide. Yes, sir. We don't have to stand around here and ask the question, what must be done? Yes, sir. Get up and let's go and do something. Yes, sir. We cannot sit down. We cannot lay down. Yes, sir. We must get up. Yes, sir. And go to work.
Do you know what real joy is in life? Visioning something and bringing it into reality. That's real joy. Do you know what the next step in joy is? Behold how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell in unity.
Tonight, you need to fasten your seatbelts. We're going to hear from some of the greatest minds in the world. I don't know about you, but I'm tired of trusting our future and the future of our children into the hands of those who don't love us. I believe we need to revitalize black leadership.
Assalamu alaikum, family, and welcome to the Mo Today series on manifestation. And we've been studying the accomplishments of the Muslims. And I'm so excited. So make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. If you enjoy this content, if you like it, you can always make a donation. And where I'm putting my donations now is on the SajdahHouseDonations.com site. You can do that. And again, welcome, welcome. This is the Mo Today series on manifestation, and I am your host, Sajdah Wendy Muhammad. And you just got me tonight. I know last week we were action-packed. We had Brother Bedford out here dropping jewels, but you stuck with me. We're going to dig into real estate a little bit. As most of you know, this series is the study of the accomplishments of the Muslims. I think it's interesting. I think it's cool to say it's the study of the accomplishments of the Muslims by modern day Muslims. What do I mean by that? Because the accomplishment of the Muslims is a historical document that was published in 1974. If you go to manifestationclass.com, you can download the PDF, and that is what we've been using as the basis for our study on this series. And that PDF, which I call an ebook, The Accomplishments of the Muslims, is a Cliff Notes version of the development of the $75+ million empire of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Excuse me. I've been talking all day, but we're going to get through this. When I start talking about this kind of stuff, it's like time stands still. And next thing I know, my voice is like, yeah, but you wearing us out. Anyway, so, we want to talk about that. Many of us are very critical of ourselves because we don't think that we've done enough and placed enough emphasis during our rebuilding on business and economic development, especially since the fall of the Nation of Islam and the destruction of the empire. And we believe that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad does everything right and exact. And I learned, excuse me, from my spiritual teacher, our father, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad built that empire as an example of what we can do. So if that is an example, then how do we do it? How do we follow the example? I believe we have incorporate a calibration process into our journey of self-improvement that extends beyond the mosque or the church. We have to incorporate that calibration process. So welcome. I see some of you all here in the chat. Let me tell you real quickly about some of the other shows that we have here on the Sajdah Wendy Muhammad YouTube channel and give you a little intro about myself. I've been skipping it lately because we have so much information. We have a lot tonight, so we're going to get through it. And we're going to take some breaks in between. And I'll ask you guys to do some class participation. So anyway, the Mind of an Entrepreneur brand of products and services. It's actually the Mind of an Entrepreneur Today. And I shortened it, so Mo Today. So you'll see MOETODAY. That's short for Mind of an Entrepreneur Today. And it's a brand of products and services that explores mental strategies and offers free game on how to navigate the world of business. And I personally offer a unique approach to business because it's unique because it comes out of my experiences. And it combines traditional disciplines with consciousness. I'm an international businesswoman, an industry disruptor, a global thought leader, philanthropist, a business and real estate developer, and I'm striving to become a God and a powerful manifester. So thank you again this evening for joining me. I'm excited to take this journey with you. For those of you who don't know, my goal is to help marginalized people around the world gain access to tools and strategies that will help us to become stronger, healthier, happier, wealthier, and to experience more love. And I'm working to build a model using mental strategies that help make doing for self infectious. So several shows we have. We have this show on Thursday nights at 7 p.m., which is the Mo Today series on manifestation. We're going to be going deeper into the various disciplines of the economic structure of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And this series is called The Accomplishments of the Muslims. On Wednesday, on the Mind of an Entrepreneur show, which was originally a podcast that I started in my bedroom in Chicago back in 2005. And then it went to syndicated radio and was broadcast around the world. And now we're doing these series on YouTube on Mo Today. It's the Black Muslim Business Series. And there's a reason for that, because we're working on a television show that I'll tell you guys about at a later date. What else we got? We got the Sajdah Saturday Morning Coffee Talks, where we talk about life, love, and business. Just the stuff that don't fit in on Wednesday night, don't fit in on Thursday night. Sometimes we talk about current topics. Sometimes we talk about things that I just wake up and feel like talking about. Sometimes we talk about things that you've DM'd me and said that you want to talk about. Okay, so that's what we do there. And tonight is week 4 of our study on the accomplishments of the Muslim. So just to recap, week one, we did an overview and a special screening of the movie A Nation of Common Sense, courtesy of NOI Archives and student minister Carlos Muhammad. Week 2, we did a comparative analysis of the economic conditions in the late 60s and early 70s to today. Last week, which was week 3, we talked about with our economic strategist, Brother Bedford, where we unpacked the components of the program. And this week, we're going to dig deeper into our series where we will break down, we'll begin the various component breakdown, the first of which is land or real estate. The other components of the economic structure are information, education, food, clothing, banking, or financial services, and international trade and commerce. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad's guidance for his followers does not stop at the farm, but he moves this power into the cities, and he set up businesses that were backed by farming products. Listen to what he said. He said, "Let us capture the market of our people by providing their needs." He went on to say, "We, the Black people of the Western Hemisphere, should unite and turn our attention to the most important and the most essential issues of life, which is farming. This is man's greatest industry," he said. "The first step of self-independence, the engine of life and the prosperity of life. After he decolonized our palates and got us off of all kind of medicine caused by fake foods and undisciplined eating habits that led primarily to the risk factors associated with cardiovascular disease. Did y'all know cardiovascular disease is the #1 killer of Black people in America? It's associated with the risk factors of hypertension, high cholesterol, diabetes, smoking, being overweight. And prior to the COVID-19 panic, we were losing well over 100,000 Black people per year to these risk factors. And at the Minimally Invasive Vascular Center, which is the micro hospital I was the lead builder and developer on, that specializes in addressing vascular related issues, we used to call this the pandemic before the pandemic. We then later learned that COVID-19 is a vasculotropic virus, which means that it travels through and damages your cardiovascular system, affecting things like your cardiopulmonary exchange, which is why you get the shortness of the breath and all the phlegm. It's a cardiopulmonary attack. Also causes blood clots or thickening of the blood that leads to strokes, heart attacks, that are now at a rate that doubles what it was before the pandemic. But the Honorable Elijah Muhammad had an answer for that too. He had plans to build a hospital for our sick and wounded. This hospital development is also a real estate play. Pay attention, because he was not talking about renting a hospital, but he was talking about purchasing land and developing a 200 to 300 bed hospital. This is an economic structure, if you all understand. So tonight, let's talk about the role that real estate plays in the development of an economy. That's what we're going to dig in today. So those of you who are into real estate, I love real estate. Literally yesterday, I was thinking about real estate and thinking about this, and I started getting all kind of ideas that I'm going to implement as it relates to real estate. So Our real estate discussion will include land as well as commercial and residential real estate. I want to read to you, though, before we go into that. I don't know if you guys can see this paper. This is a vintage Muhammad Speaks newspaper. It says Muhammad's aim for Black people in America. I have to be very careful with this. This is very fragile. I really should have on my gloves. It was issued July 5th, 1968. And in the very center, there's an article written by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Messenger of Allah, and it's entitled Muhammad's Aims for the Black People in America. And it says the program is as follows. Number one, an estimated cost for the initial stages is $10 million to set up the groundwork for a center in the Chicago area. Number two, all types of technology, modern engineers, electronic, mechanical, construction, civil, surveying, draftsmen, general, and electric engineers. Number three, the highest educated and trained teachers in languages, good Spanish, French, and Arabic teachers, mathematic teachers, economic teachers, expert national and international teachers for the above said courses. If necessary, we will hire scholars and scientists for our university from any nation of our people sympathetic to our rise. We must remember that we have to be qualified to take care of self with the help of God and others who are sympathetic towards our rise. We're not talking about no rinky-dink program here. We're talking about a real economic development program. Then he says, will those of you who are willing to help the so-called Negroes, some of y'all get hung up on that word because some people under a certain age don't even know what a Negro is, but a Negro is what we were called before we were called Black. So if you study the history of the different names that we went by based on what society called us, you had colored and Negro. Well, when he talks about so-called Negroes, he's talking about Black people. Some of y'all say African Americans. So I'll start that sentence over. Will those of you who are willing to help the so-called Negroes do something for self by way of reform? Help me raise them into this desired position you claim you are willing to see them in. Will you help raise a people who are in the mud of civilization, up out of the ignorance and filth that they are in, to a position of being equally recognized with the nations of the earth? I'm going to jump in here because a lot of this language is difficult for some of us to comprehend, not because we have comprehension problems, not because we can't read, but because we really don't think that we're in the mud of civilization. We really don't have a true comparative analysis to what our accomplishments are like as a people compared to the broader community. We are so blinded by and so brainwashed by the systemic biases that exist in the institutions that we literally worship, that some of this language will escape us. That's why we're digging deep into this economic plan, because I really want you all to see how not only were the conditions in the late 60s and the early 70s, in some cases, the same or worse than they are now, but the program worked. So if you're wondering, what do we have to do? You're tired of turning on the news and seeing us being killed in the street, and you know something is wrong, but you just can't reconcile it because oftentimes we're such slaves to the institutions that we worship, whether it be our jobs or our educational system or whatever. Anyway, so he goes on in this article. I won't read the whole thing, but he goes on in this article to talk about setting up farms. And the setting up of farms and controlling our own stomachs and what we put in our stomachs, and managing and taking back control of our healthcare, our own health, I should say, is really, really critical. The healthcare industry makes millions of dollars off of us. Why? Because we eat fake foods. We're undisciplined when it comes to our eating. Most of us pick things up off the shelves and we don't even look at the ingredients, because if we did, we'd see a whole lot of things there that we don't even recognize, that we probably don't even want to eat. And so we're talking about changing our diet, which is going to change the way we think. It's going to change how much we weigh. It's going to change our body structure. It's going to change how we look. And so we're starting with land and farmland. So anyway, welcome in the chat. I see Sandra D. Walaikum salam. I see Sister Alitha. Walaikum salam. Welcome, welcome, everyone. Okay, let's get into this real estate. Y'all ready to get into some real estate? Some of y'all have heard my real estate stories. If you listen to my radio show, you've heard it. Many of you know that I spent a number of years as a real estate agent before moving to the development side of real estate. Many of the business models that I've designed include real estate as a primary component of the development that came directly from my studies of the economic program of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, putting a real estate play into the businesses. For example, in the development of the micro hospital in Maryland, land acquisition and real estate development is coupled with the delivery of healthcare services. Many healthcare financial strategists suggest that healthcare providers use rental space to deliver goods and services. That's not an ideal scenario, in my opinion, because with any business, there is an advantage to having the appreciation of real estate happening concurrently or while you are growing your business. So now you have an asset that is appreciating as a result of the business you are growing, as opposed to the appreciation, as opposed to your business causing the appreciation of somebody else's asset. And that somebody else is benefiting from you developing your business in that space. Not only is there the leasehold improvements that add to the value of the rental space, but there's the traffic count that your business contributes to the space. All commercial property benefits from having viable and thriving tenants. That's what drives up the value of commercial properties. Are there good businesses there? Is there a nice flow of traffic? Are they good? Is it clean? Do people flow? You even are required in most cases to be open at certain times of the day. You can't have a business in the mall and decide that you're just going to close on Tuesday, because in your lease is going to tell you you have to be open on these days from this time to this time at a minimum. Okay. Sometimes they'll even tell you when you can close and you can't even be open after hours. It's because by controlling that traffic, they're increasing the valuation of their property. Your contribution to the property being commercially viable is important. And this impacts rental rates and overall property valuations. Commercial leases always tend to be longer, which can be advantageous to the owner when it comes to obtaining loans or, again, valuing their real estate portfolio. But your successful business is adding value to someone else's property, is what I want you to see. What if you are building the value of your own commercial space? What if you decided that you no longer wanted to deliver goods or services from that space? Let's say you were in healthcare and you said, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. Well, then if you own the property, you can turn around and perhaps even demand a higher rent for your space because of the economic contribution that your successful business provided that space. Let me know in the chat if y'all getting this. Now, we talked about the acquisition of residential and commercial real estate as well as land. Okay. How many of you have gone to manifestationclass.com and downloaded your free copy of the accomplishments of the Muslims? Let me know in the chat if you've already gotten your download. If you have it and you read it, drop some points in the chat that you learned related to real estate during your study of the accomplishments of the Muslims. And I encourage you to go back and look at it again, because I think you can look at it from one perspective, but if you go back and look at it from the perspective of learning to construct an economy, I think you'll see more. What was said about land or real estate in the accomplishments of the Muslims? Was something I was going to tell you guys. Oh, I think I'll tell you later, because I pulled out all these Muhammad Speaks. I'll tell you later. We're going to talk about land. While y'all doing that, let's talk about land. Let's take a look at the economic characteristics of land. You hear the Honorable Elijah Muhammad talk a lot about the acquisition of land. Why is land so important to an economic structure? How many of y'all remember economics? Land is scarce. This means that there is a limit to its supply. You can't simply make more of it if you want to. Land can be improved, so you can build upon it. And improvements include economic development of the land. For example, building a house generally will increase the value of the land, or building a commercial space. Okay? The real estate industry in itself traces its roots back to the late 19th century. But it doesn't begin to take shape as we know it today until the early 1900s. The National Association of Realtors was established as the National Association of Real Estate Exchanges in 1908 right here in Chicago as a way to expand real estate matters. Chicago has always had a master plan when it came to real estate. It is why it is both the most architecturally diverse city in the country, but it's also one of the most segregated cities as well, because that real estate plan was also systemic in terms of how it impacting us and controlling us on where we could go, where we could buy, what we could do. We'll go into that a little bit later. Real estate is considered the undisputed king of economic development. Type that in the chat. Real estate is considered the undisputed king of economic development. This is why once we go through this class today, you're going to look at people, because I see this trend now where you have other Black people. You know, Tom Burrell said that at a certain point, the brainwashed become the brainwashers. And so now you have Black people going out telling other Black people, don't buy real estate, don't buy land, don't buy real estate. And these are financial advisors and people who are saying, nope, 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 just rent, use somebody else's stuff, use somebody else's money. See, that's all designed by a man or a people who know that they are temporary on the planet. But they didn't say that when they founded America. They didn't come in here going to the Native Americans, hey, we want to rent y'all land. We're going to dig into that a little bit too. But anyway, real estate, put that in the chat, is considered the undisputed king of economic development. Even if real estate never appreciates, the fact that you own a chunk of the earth, which is a scarce commodity, they ain't making no more real estate. The fact that you own a chunk of it makes it an undisputed king of economic development. Real estate impacts the U.S. economy. Real estate affects the economy because it makes up a large portion of individual and business wealth across economic sectors. When real estate prices rise, wealth increases. So individuals and businesses are more likely to borrow and spend. Let me read to you a few notes that I have I've been taking them on the importance of real estate in the U.S. economy. I hope y'all doing okay. Real estate is considered the undisputed king of, that's right, it's the undisputed king for various reasons. All right, so here's some notes I took. Let's see. In 2018, real estate construction contributed $1.15 trillion to the nation's economic output. That's 6.2% of U.S. gross domestic product. It's more than the 1.13 trillion in 2017, but still less than the 2006 peak of 1.19 trillion. So back in 2006, construction was at an all-time high. Real estate construction hasn't been that high since. At that time, real estate construction was 8.9% or almost 9% of the gross domestic product. Real estate construction is labor intensive and a major force in job creation. The drop in housing construction was a big contribution to the recession's high unemployment rate. There's a lot of people that are employed by the construction industry or by the byproducts of the construction industry. Construction is the only part of real estate that is measured by the GDP or the gross domestic product. The only part is construction. But real estate affects many other areas of economics well-being that aren't measured. For example, a decline in real estate sales eventually leads to a decline in real estate prices. So in real estate, when the sales go down, the prices tend to go down. That lowers the value of all homes, whether owners are actively selling it or not. It reduces the number of home equity loans available to owners, and this ultimately reduces consumer spending as more homeowner cash is tied up in home projects. Now, understand that while real estate is the undisputed king of economic development, those who benefit from the almost 70% of the U.S. economy that is based on personal consumption have used real estate to accelerate their wealth. Interesting, right? So a lot of us go into business. We go into that part of business which makes up 70% of the U.S. economy. It's personal consumption products, right? And so most of us go into that business. And a lot of us don't realize that people who build wealth, when they go into that business, when they get those cash flows, right? And they're standing in front of all those checks, they take that money and then go invest in real estate, become part of construction projects and stuff like that. So that's kind of how that cycle grows. It's the two different segments and how they work together. See, wealth is not only just money or the appreciation of your real estate. It is also how you live and where you live. So a beautiful home in a safe and beautiful neighborhood has a higher valuation than that same beautiful home in an unsafe neighborhood. This is a big way in which they can drive real estate prices down in our neighborhoods is if they aren't properly policed or you have a lot of criminal activity. You can have the same houses in another neighborhood, but they'll be worth less. So the key to increasing the value of real estate in our community is the safety of the community along with the quality of the real estate. And if you study the accomplishments of the Muslims, when we went into neighborhoods, they tend to become safer. And so when Muslims go into the neighborhood, especially those of us in the Nation of Islam, when we go into neighborhoods, we drive the prices up in the neighborhood because we make the community safe, more safe, just by our presence, primarily the presence of the FOI, the Fruit of Islam, who generally help to reduce crime in a particular neighborhood. Interesting, right? So just imagine if we buy up a certain community, a little small town, or we start to really populate a community or a neighborhood or a cul-de-sac, you will then begin to see, because of how we interact with our people and what our presence commands, if you will, of our people, you will see the prices in that community begin to go up. So now, and people would like to have us think that we don't affect the economy. We affect the undisputed king of the economy because we affect real estate prices. You go on any block, I don't care if it's Chicago, Philly, or whatever, I don't care where it is. If there's 20 houses on the block, you move in 10 Muslims, the value of property in that neighborhood is going to go up. Has a lot to do with behavioral patterns, has a lot to do with disciplinary patterns, has a lot to do with what we believe and understand as Muslims. I had a friend of mine in Africa say to me, he said, you know what? He said, the property of a Muslim is sacred. And it is the responsibility of every Muslim to protect the property of their fellow Muslims. And I thought, wow, that's deep. Because you see, in the Nation of Islam, We see all of us as Black people as Muslim. Muslim only means one who submits to do the will of God. And so you don't have to wear the title Muslim outwardly to be a Muslim. Because if you are listening to the word of God, listening to the spirit of God, letting that spirit guide you and mold you, then you're submitting to the will of God and you're a Muslim. And so we protect the properties around us. Anyway, in my travels around the world, I have heard people say that Americans are obsessed with land, especially in Africa, because they got so much land. And they always talk about how, as Americans, we're obsessed with land. Land ownership is deeply rooted in human history. Early tribal cultures, and still many of them today, use the land and its resources for sacred reasons only as needed rather than for economic ones. So as Americans, we use land for economic reasons because it has become part of the economic warfare. Rights to land were transferred between generations. It wasn't until early agricultural societies that people began to settle land. The ruling class recognized land ownership as a way to hold on to and increase its power and wealth. I was watching a program on the History Channel about land Sunday night, and I can't remember the name of it, but this is one of the things that was said in the program. Y'all all right? Give me some feedback in the chat. Let me know how you're enjoying this discussion on real estate. Because I really want us to understand why land and real estate was so important to the economic structure that the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad put together, and why it was so critical to the accomplishments of the Muslims. We have to calibrate ourselves to that. And hopefully this history will help us to do that. Something about land lies deep in the American psyche. And I wrote this down from this show I was watching. It says, since the early 20th century, most Americans have resided in cities and suburbs, yet the mystique of agrarian life draws millions to farmers markets and makes the family farm a touchstone of American politics. You know how you live in neighborhoods and they say, oh, it's a farmer's market this weekend and everybody just goes there. It's so crowded. It's because there's something very innate that makes us know that this is how we should be eating and we should be living. That cowboy, that rugged knight of the open West, and all these American stories, it remains very iconic. And squabbles between developers and preservationists over land use become battles over the meaning and destiny of America. That's because there are battles over the meaning and destiny of America. What does that mean? The history of America's land is the history of the country itself. The history of America's land is the history of the country itself. They came up in here killing and stealing for this land. That tells you how they risked their lives for this land. They gave their lives cutting out prairie lands and rugged territory to make roads and things like that. And eventually they, got them some slaves and put us to work on this land and on this plantation. But land is very, very important. They went over 9,000 miles to go get people to work this land, because working the land is hard. The history of America's land is the history of the country itself. America grew into its defining institutions even as it grew into its land. The land inspired American independence. It spawned American so-called democracy. It undergirded America's rise to world power. Land symbolized opportunity to generations of Americans, starting with colonists who never had the chance of owning property in Europe. This is why they wanted to make sure that once we came up out of slavery, that they controlled our access to what they believed they had a right to. It's probably what led to America's obsession with real estate. The fact that the early settlers couldn't even own real estate in Europe. They weren't even allowed to own real estate. So when they came over here, they wanted land and real estate so bad, they started killing for it. That's a deep psyche if you think about that. So whenever you see somebody saying to you today, don't buy land, don't buy real estate, how dare you tell us not to buy land and real estate when you couldn't buy real estate and land when you were in Europe? You came over here and you killed everything that was moving to control this land. Without going deep into the history of how land was stolen from those that were already here, but the entire American economy and the freedom of Americas was hinged upon two things: land ownership and slave labor. Land ownership and slave labor. Just up out of slavery, Black people. Let's talk about us. Sister said the bigger the plantation, the more status they had. It's all about land and real estate ownership. But then check us out. See, we so smart. We came up out of slavery. Just up out of slavery, Black people understood the importance of acquiring land. This ain't new to us. It wasn't new to us in the 1960s, and it's not new to us today. By 1910, records showed that more Black Americans owned land than ever before in the history of the United States. Over 14 million acres of land were owned by approximately 210,000 Black people, leading some historians to refer to this time period as the height of Black land ownership. So when the Honorable Elijah Muhammad came and told us, let's start buying back land. Let's not sell grandma's house. You hear me talking today about urban historic preservation. What happened? The land oftentimes was stolen from us. And we were redlined and denied access to America's wealthy obsession. They say we obsess with land. I call it America's wealthy obsession. This land loss has plagued Black America since emancipation. It has plagued us in terms of the transference of generational wealth. It has plagued us in terms of us not controlling what we consume and what we put in our body. It has plagued us because we were relegated to ghettos and deplorable situations where we don't have adequate drinking water. And I could go on and on about that. So that is why acquisition of land and real estate in the economic program of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad is so important. So when you see that in the accomplishments of the Muslims, you understand why there was so much of an emphasis on that. The proportion of the United States under Black ownership has actually shrunk over the last 100 years or so. At their peak in 1910, African American farmers made up around 14% of all U.S. farmers back in 1910, owning 16 to 19 million acres of land. By 2012, Black Americans represented just 1.6% of the farming community, owning 3.6 million acres of land. Another study shows a 98% decline in Black farmers between 1920 and 1997. This contrasts sharply with an increase in acreage owned by white farmers over the same period. Now, some of y'all saying to yourself, well, I ain't really tripping because I ain't trying to be a farmer. It ain't about everybody being farmers. It's about certain ones of us being farmers so that we can go buy food and consume things that we can trust. That's a whole nother conversation. In a 1998 report, the U.S. Department of Agriculture ascribed this decline to a long and well-documented history of discrimination against Black farmers, ranging from the New Deal and USDA discriminatory practices dating from the 1930s to 1950s era exclusion from legal, title, and loan resources. You can't tell me this man is not a genius, and then some. Discriminatory practices have also affected who owns property as well as land. In 2017, the racial home ownership gap was at its highest level for 50 years, with 79.1% of white Americans owning a home compared to 41% of Black Americans. This gap is even larger than it was when racist housing practices such as redlining, which denied Black residents mortgages to buy or loans to renovate property, were legal. And the reason why I keep harping on the genius of the emphasis of land, because it's going right into this economic model that has already been set up before us. We see the majority communities do it. It's time for us start buying land, start buying real estate, start shopping with Black farmers and people who are growing food that we know we can trust. And it's important for those of us that are in business, when we're introducing much needed goods and services into our community, when we're becoming farmers, that we don't take those same systems and processes that we learn in the broader community and bring them over into our community, because it's going to require the same interdependencies in order for it to be successful. So if you see, you work for a farmer and you see him cutting corners by doing things like dyeing and stretching potatoes, don't you go do that when you start your farm. The lack of ownership is crucial to understanding the crippling economic disparity that has hollowed out the Black middle class and continues to plague Black America, making it harder to accrue wealth and pass it on to generations. All right. Everybody now is like, oh, get you some insurance, all that. That's cool. But where's your land? You buying up all this stuff, but you're living in an apartment. Where's your house? Where's your home? Where is something that you can pass on to your children, to your relatives when you leave? Check this out. A 2017 report found that the median net worth for non-immigrant Black American households in the greater Boston region was just US $8, but for whites, it was $247,500. So we were proportionally, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. We were 80% less for our net worth in that Boston area than our greater community. And it was due to the general housing and lending discrimination through restrictive covenants and redlining and lending practices. If you know anything about real estate in that area, that part of Boston, and even going into New York City, it's very, very, very racist and very systemically difficult for non-immigrant Black people to go in and buy up some of this types of land. So when you saw our people in the early 1900s buying up land in Boston and Harlem, that was a big deal. Because right now, our median income, let's say this differently, our median income is 80% less than our white counterparts in some of those areas of New York City and Boston. That's huge. That's huge. I would have to venture to say that it's probably the same in just about every major city, but it's probably more so, there's probably a bigger gap on the East Coast in the New England states, just because the cost of living up there is just so expensive. You have a big, hefty cost of living in California, but the state of California does a lot of supplements that you don't see a lot in the New England states. All right, so the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, it's no question that he was right to include farming, land, and real estate acquisition as a cornerstone of his economic structure. See, because by the late 1960s, home ownership was primarily associated with the elite, those who held power and wealth, because they had piled us all up in the projects and in apartments. And if you could break out and get you a little house or something, that was a big deal. You was moving on up. When the U.S. was being established, fertile plains were staked out and settled in a might makes right manner. What does that mean? So that those who could defend the land were the ones who kept it. So when they came in and tried to steal the land and they came in to fight the Indians for it, if you couldn't defend the land, then they just stole it. They even established a whole department that now we know as the police department to protect their land. This is heavy and interesting stuff. The Muslim Farm Report that I didn't get to show you guys this newspaper here. Be careful with this. Let's see. This is the Farm Report. And it was so important that in here, in this section, he talks about the reports of the farm. And it just talks about the different products and the imports and the things that were being sold and consumed, halal meats. And you're talking about watermelon and corn. I'm talking about healthy corn and healthy potatoes, not the dyed ones that you get at McDonald's that they have to actually, literally, they put a gas on them in order to turn the potato white. And once it turns white, it has to sit like in a barn because the fumes are so strong. Once the fumes die down, then they go and sell them to your local fast food restaurant. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about good squash. And I wish you guys could see this. The fish, just feeding multitudes of people and doing that through the means of real estate and land acquisition was something so very important. So that's, I hope you all got a sense of why farmland and real estate is the first, let me say it this way, is one of the primary bases of the economic program. And we're going to continue to go into these components because there's various components. There's the exchange of information. We're going to talk about how important information is to an economy. We're going to talk about how important healthcare and hospitals are to an economy. We're going to talk about how important independent education is in an economy and what the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the early believers went through to establish independent education that they're not even given credit for. I mean, today we got charter school and you got this private school and that private school. Not even realize that they went to jail and risks all kind of abuse just to establish independent education in our community. So we're gonna talk about that. We're gonna talk about the rights of women. We're gonna talk about all these components that were included and that were staples of the economy that was built by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And then you'll be able to compare and contrast and understand why this economic structure that we're in now tends to falter and is weak and is actually falling. The dollar's plummeting because of the what's happening with these key areas. That way, when you look at the news, you really understand what it means. What does it mean economically when women are not involved? What does it mean economically when women are involved? What does it mean economically when our children can go to independent school systems? What does it mean economically when those school systems also educate the children in the areas of the arts? What does that mean? And even when we get into this educational system, I really want you guys to understand that this is my own personal opinion. I believe that the American school system stopped teaching children 30 years ago. They just kind of go there and get moved along. But critical thinking, reasoning skills, advanced levels of mathematics, you just don't, you don't see it. I believe that they have not told us that the public school system in many cases, and I don't mean to be offensive to any teachers, but as a whole, stopped educating people, our children, a long time ago. And so if you're not supplementing your child with some other programs, if they're not going into an independent educational system, you have to ask yourself, are they really being educated, or are they just being moved along? Is that just a babysitter because you got to go to work? So we're going to talk about that. Might sting a little bit, but we're going to talk about that. Okay, let me see what y'all saying in the chat. I hope y'all enjoying this conversation. I see Sandra D, you and Aletha, y'all blowing the chat up. Sandra D said, from the farmland to the land of your home, real estate to businesses and jobs. Yeah, and you know what? Let me say this. I tell this funny story because, you know, as a Muslim woman, one of the, and I'll say it in plain language so you all get it. One of the things that we learn is how to sew. And I'm not the best at sewing. I'm pretty creative. I can paint and draw, but my sewing skills, I need some help in that category. So I remember thinking to myself, well, what about people who don't know how to farm? What about people who don't know how to sew? What about people who don't know how to do that? Well, that's why we create a community, because you'll have so-and-so's dress shop or wherever where you can go and learn, or not learn, but maybe buy your clothes, buy your food. That's why we're talking about an ecosystem. We talk about that every Wednesday, creating the ecosystem. You got this sister that makes jewelry, that brother that makes ice cream, this sister that farms, and another person that's a butcher, somebody else who builds furniture. And so we're talking about building a community. And the whole idea is really going into products and services that or introducing much needed goods and services into our community that we can trust, and being conscious about the way in which we do business. Okay. Sister said they tried to take over Mason, Tennessee from the mostly Black people, where they were building a Ford plant, and they have the only fresh water coming through the area. Yeah, start to pay attention in the news to the moves that are made on people when they start to acquire land and establish communities. And that these are important strategies, important things for us to know as we begin to build and develop. And if we really want to increase our wealth, we're going to have to get some of the most scarcest and valuable commodity that there is, which is a piece of this earth. All right. So how many of y'all are registered for Donate and Sip? How many of y'all are going? How many of y'all are ready? I'm going to decide what component. Before I talk about Donate and Sip, I'll decide what component we're going to talk about next week. This week we did real estate. You all have some ideas, let me know. We might do education, or we may just figure out. I think information is probably the next most important. So maybe we'll talk about information and the importance of information in an economy, because that's a loaded conversation. And I hope that we can't cover everything here, but I just want you guys to get an idea of how important real estate is to an economy, and how brilliant and genius the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is to include that as one of the staples of his economic structure. All right, y'all. So make sure you get yourself registered for Donate and Sip. We're raising money for the completion of the home of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad at 4847 South Woodlawn Avenue. Most of the time, I ask you guys, make sure you like and subscribe to the page, and make sure you donate something to this Mind of an Entrepreneur movement. It's all about mental strategies to help us navigate the world of business. You can do that in one of two ways. You can support me with my most recent project of my life, which is the renovation and restoration of the former home of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. You see that scrolling across the bottom here, SajdahHouseDonations.com. Or if you say, you know what, I just want to Cash App and join the mailing list, you can do that too. Just text DO for self, DO the number 4 SELF to 855-574-9099. And you can Cash App your support for this movement at $Mode Today, $MOETODAY. You got anything out of today, make a donation, support us, support the platform. And most importantly, make sure we see you all for Donate and Sip on Saturday. And I'll remind you all, because we have Sajdah Saturday morning coffee talks, Saturday morning at 6 a.m. where we talk about life, love, and business. I got a good one for y'all this Saturday. So anyway, peace and blessings, family. Study the accomplishments of the Muslims. Work to calibrate yourself to what was accomplished, because that example or that template was designed so that we know what to do and what not to do. So, all right, family, peace and blessings. Be sure to get your commemorative Elijah coin and make your donations.
This is Sister Sajdah Muhammad. We are proud to announce that the Sajdah House commemorative Elijah coins are finally here. As we renovate and restore the former home of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, we have recycled the old copper gutters and downspouts and created a 1-ounce 39mm coin made of 100% pure copper. Each coin is professionally graded and has its own barcode and registration number. This priceless heirloom, made from recycled copper from the messenger's home, is now available at SajdahHouse.com.